Team Liquid's roster for the 2023 LCS season is a huge gamble, and I really don't agree with their coaching staff choice because they brought up a head coach in Marin that hasn't been in the scene forever now. And let's face it, when he last played, it's not like he was ever thought to be the most cerebral player. Also, I want to get into the idea of the Korean culture barrier because people think just because someone is of Korean blood, that means they immediately have the same culture as someone from Korea. But that can't be further from the truth. But more on that later. Let's get into the player roster. We have Summit in top lane, Pyoshik in the jungle, Harry in mid, and Yeon in ADC, and of course Koreaboo as the franchise player in support. Let's go to start off with the top lane, like we always do, because wow, I did not expect Summit to return to the game and especially into the LCS. While I don't think it's necessarily a bad idea to give him another chance given that, the whole Cloud9 coaching staff debacle that happened in Season 12, I think TL are going into this saying, well, Summit shit on every other top laner so hard that he definitely is worth another shot. And on top of that, if he is sort of a problem child, Koreaboo should theoretically be able to demand respect from him in both his entire accolades that he's achieved as a player and also by age, of course, given the Korean culture. So with all of that said, I actually think Summit is a very easy gamble. Also, let's also point out that top lane has historically been a very weak role traditionally in NA for a long time. It has essentially become the stop the bleeding role where it's perma weak side because no one is good enough to demand the resources to be strong side. And also, let's be fair that Riot has also an inherent bias in making team fighting and bot side the main focus for balance because, well, let's face it, it's just the most entertaining way to package the LCS and things from a competitive standpoint in pro play, and it pleases the most amount of players when it comes to just regular pleb play. So to have Summit, a guy that can hard carry, that's such an unusual weapon in your arsenal that he's worth his weight in gold, I would say. So I really actually like this pickup. Pyoshik is returning in for the jungle after winning Worlds 2022 on DRX. Now, we all know the reason why he was picked up is because Steve has always been horny for Worlds winners, i.e. see my boy Piglet. That said, Pyoshik does look like he's an all-around balanced player. And this is just going off of his Worlds gameplay, right? I didn't watch a whole lot of LCK before, so this is just with that caveat. But he is able to play an aggro style, but he also is able to chill back and help plug holes when necessary. What I like about Pyoshik is he is consistently aware of his win conditions. Is Zeka fed? Okay, play towards him and play off his playmaking for split pushes. Is Def popping off mid game? Refocus for team fights. He didn't really make any blunders at Worlds, and if there's one thing missing in the LCS, I mean, other than laning, team fighting, CS, itemization, macro, micro positioning. Sorry. If there's one thing missing in the LCS, it's knowing your win condition. Too many teams go into the game not knowing their win condition or what their team comp excels at or how to change their game plan if maybe their top laner is down 2 deaths. But Pyoshik is really good at this. He's also aggro enough that he won't be taken advantage of. So overall, I think he's actually a great pickup. Harry is the mid laner for Team Liquid. I think I'm saying that right. His real legal name is Harry, so I assume it's the same thing. Now, what makes me I guess, curious about this is the obvious. He's really not an import, right? Or he is, but obviously one of those married a rich white guy to get a green card type of import. Actually, now that I think about it, Steve, he kind of does fit that bill, right? Anyways, Harry is from the Oceanic region, and if you know anything about that region, well, it's fucking atrocious. The only notable players that have ever come from there really have been, what, FBI, Fudge, Schernfire, we all know the story behind that one. Hell, I'll give you Chippies too, and Lost as well. But Oceania, or Australia, basically, is a considerably weak region, and historically, it's been something like 250 LP to get into Challenger, which, by the way, is very, very fucking low. It's basically people have gone over there and they were like Diamond 2 in North America, and they could get Challenger in Oceania. But anyways, so that being said, he's played his time in Academy, and he did, in fact, win both 2022 spring and summer. So if you take a chance on a rookie, it's probably now. His champion pool looks fine with the likes of Ari, LeBlanc, Azir, and, a spicy pick like some Yone picks. His stats are actually also pretty bonkers as well too. He has had the highest CSD at 10, being 10.1. He had the highest DPM of any mid laner at 748, and his XP difference at 10 was the highest at 169. This looks like a good gamble and helps balance out your budget to afford someone like a Pioshik or a CoreJJ, so I could see the entire reasoning for going for a player like Harry. Next, we have Yeon as ADC and CoreJJ as support. This bot lane, I will say, if there's anyone that can bring up a rookie talent, it's CoreJJ, right? Like, we all know that. His time with Tactical proved that he can help foster the best sides of an ADC and bring them to their maximum potential. Also, if Ayla's play, which is Yeon's Academy support, is any reflection into how good Yeon actually is, because let's face it, ADC and support reflect on how well the other is doing, then I do have some high hopes for this guy, because Ayla was legitimately good in the lock-in tournament in 2022 when he replaced CoreJJ. Now, yes, I know that's some kind of proxy type transitive property, Full Metal Alchemist shit, but maybe even CoreJJ can turn a dog into a human. Yo, if you know, you know. Anyways, as the roster rounds out, of course, CoreJJ, y'all already know how incredible this guy is. There's no need to explain him other than in the context of the entire team, because he's clearly the team captain. So, as I alluded to before, all of these guys are Korean by blood, right? With Harry, he is from Australia, and Yeon is from the US. Now, they all may be able to speak Korean, but that doesn't mean the cultures are automatically the same. I have a US Korean friend, right? He's first generation. I've known him for a really long time, like 15 years. And he would always say it was funny when his cousins would come over to the US to visit, because they still acted so differently and they weren't really used to the US culture, even if it was the US Korean culture. Now, assuming someone who has the same ethnicity having the same culture, I think is super off base. That would be the same as assuming someone of US Irish heritage has the same culture as someone from Ireland, or an African American has the same culture as someone from Africa. It just doesn't make any sense, right? Like, I'm also half Korean, which doesn't mean I have the same culture as a Korean from Korea. So, point being, I think there's going to be a bigger culture barrier than one might first assume. And the worst thing that can happen in a team is a culture rift. It's not even people disagreeing or even skill difference, for instance. It's an unbridgeable gap of culture. if you don't have that, you aren't even coming from the same starting point, you can hardly even understand someone else's perspective. I spoke with Prawley about this when he was a coach for 100 Thieves, and he said that this was one of the challenges he knew he could not let happen, to have a little clique of Koreans and then English speakers having their own as well. That creates a huge divide. So hopefully that doesn't happen on Team Liquid, but I have a feeling it's going to be like much harder than they think. The hardcore grindlord mentality of Koreans, the age respect, the whole social hierarchy dynamic is probably going to be really challenging for Harry and Yeon, because I assume the traditional Korean dynamics will be the mainstay in this team, given that 3/5 of the players are from Korea and the head coach is also from Korea. That being said, Marin is the head coach and Rainover is the assistant coach. I don't agree with this. Even if you're running a full Korean roster, Marna is not the move. He's a completely unproven quantity. Yes, sure, he won Worlds in 2013. I'm not saying that that isn't worth anything, but it's much more different being a player than it is a coach. Case study being Bjergsen. Now, if you had told me this was going to be Song or CV Max or some shit, like fine, but Marin has never coached before. I'm sure he had some coaching-esque responsibilities when he was on Afrika Freaks in the top lane, but other than that, he's been out of the game for a while now, and it's a bad gamble to place a bet on your coaching staff with a full Korean roster in the LCS. If anything, I think that should be the strongest part of your entire game plan heading into 2023 if you wanted to do a full Korean roster. Like, why would you skimp out on the most critical part to make this entire thing work? It doesn't make any sense to me. Is your idea that maybe you want CoreJJ to be like this part-time coach and take on even more responsibility than he already has done? I guarantee you that by the end of this season, CoreJJ is going to be burnt out like a motherfucker. Now, as for Rainover, I think that's certainly a no-brainer. He's obviously the best choice for this, so I have no problem with him being assistant coach. Not really much more to say on him other than because jungle pathing has changed a ton this season. Rainover is your secret weapon to help Pyosik digest new paths and create an efficient system for route, which I think Rainover is just a fucking legend when it comes to figuring out the most optimal route in the jungle path. And then not only that, but Rainover would have been the move regardless of if you were to get a traditional Korean coach like Song versus, someone like a Marin or someone like a Reapert or anything. He still would have been the pick if you're going to do a full Korean roster, right? He does have to be that bridge between the gap, as it were, anyway. So I think Rainover is a great pick, and either or, I don't disagree with it. Overall, I actually think this team will be okay, but not earth-shattering. There are some question mark pings in the mid lane as far as firepower is concerned, which leaves more heavy lifting for Pyosik to shore that up. I also have big questions around the culture adaptation because, especially as I said, when I think about someone like Yamato Cannon, I talked about him in a previous video when he moved over to the LCK, would he be enforcing more Western viewpoints, culture, etc., going to Sandbox Gaming? The same can be said here. Will upper management enforce more Western culture into this full Korean roster? Will they even know when or how to step in if things get a little bit dodgy? This team certainly has a decent roster on paper, as ADC is naturally just autopilot, so it's not a big deal that he's a rookie. And Summit is still probably a beast, but I don't think you can win a championship without addressing culture and team dynamics first. And this is the big reason why I don't think this roster has what it takes to win the LCS.